Hi everyone, my name is Jen with Sloat Garden Center. I wanted to talk to you today a little bit about orchid care, and I'll do a demonstration on how to repot. All right, for orchid care, orchids typically like to be in a situation that has bright light. And it's better if they're in sort of a humid situation too. So bright light would not necessarily be direct light coming through the window, but in a bright room. A way to increase the humidity in your room and for your plant is to create a humidity tray using gravel. It's just a simple, all this is a saucer with gravel in it. And this helps, if you put some water in it, it helps sort of create this humidity environment that's good for the plants. You can also set the plants directly on it, and that's effective too. When you go to fertilize your orchid, you want to be sure to use a food that's formulated for orchids specifically. Something like these. Orchids typically don't have a lot of soil or anything to really retain a lot of nutrients or moisture at any one time. And so the advantage to using a formula that's suited for orchids is it's formulated for quick absorption. So the plant is able to take it up right away and get enough fertilizer. When you fertilize, as with any plants, it's really important to make sure that the orchid has been watered first. So I kind of like to soak it in a tray of water just to make sure that it already is somewhat moist, and that way it's able to take up a little bit more of the nutrients when you fertilize it. When you go to water your orchid, I would suggest either using a tray, a saucer like this, or just putting them in your sink. You want to water the orchid so it goes down from the top, but it can also sit in water for a little bit to just be sure it's adequately saturated. So a plant like this, I would let sit maybe for 15 or 20 minutes. Once I let the water go through it, and then take it out of the saucer and let it drain out in your sink, and then go ahead and put it back in your container. As far as soil or bark or moss, each orchid has a different growing medium, and each grower typically uses a different blend. So what I suggest doing is when you go to repot your orchid, look at what it looks like when you pull it out of the container. I'll show you that shortly, but I want to just let you know that there's different sized barks. So typically there's a mini bark or a medium bark. If you're talking about cymbidium orchids, those are more terrestrial orchids or ground orchids, and so they're actually in more of a soil mix. A lot of times people just use straight sphagnum moss too, and that's just as effective. So just really look at what your orchid's planted in, and when you go to repot, try to mimic that media as much as possible. Container options. So there's these great pots like this that are orchid containers. They're orchid pots, and they're suited for orchids because they have holes in the side to allow for that airflow. So you can repot them in a container like this, or you can go into a plastic container that you can set into a larger pot to cover it like that. Either way is fine. Just be sure that you don't jump up a lot in container size. In other words, if you have a 4-inch orchid, you wouldn't want to repot it into an 8-inch or a 10-inch pot. You would just want to go up slightly to a 5-inch or a 6-inch pot. All right, so this is actually my orchid from home that I thought I would show how to repot. I wanted to just show quickly how I'm gonna prepare it. So I'm gonna take all the leaves off, and I'm actually gonna prune it. This is broken here, so I'm gonna prune it right above the node. I'll show that. And then I'm gonna prune this side too, also right above a node. And I'll take it out of this container and repot it into here. So what you'll notice when you take it out of the pot is that there's going to be some roots that have this nice fleshy green to them. And then there's going to also be some dead roots. So what I'm going to do is take all this, this sphagnum out, and I'll be cutting the dead roots and just loosening everything up to repot it. So I just wanted to show really quick. So this is an example of a dead root. It's kind of dried up looking. So that's the difference between that and that. And you can either just like pull them off or cut them. And there's another one in there. So I'm just cleaning this up. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and repot it in here. I have my fresh sphagnum that I've been soaking. It's really important that the sphagnum is saturated before you use it. So yeah, so soak it for a little bit. And then what I do is kind of put a little bit in to start. And push the plant in and set it sort of at the level that I want it to end up at. And then I just take the sphagnum and I work it all through the roots and pack it down as I'm doing that. So I just want to show that I have it really packed in. Yes, the water is coming out the sides, but that's just for now. I mean, this will dry up, and remember, we'll just be watering about every 7 to 10 days. Another thing to note is on this prune, I did prune it right above these little nodes. That part, some of it might die, all of it might die, but I'm just keeping it here for now to see what's going to happen. There might very likely be a sprout that comes down here or wherever, and when that starts sprouting, then I'll cut the stem down to that point. But I'm just going to leave it at this height for now and see what it does. The last step, and this is purely for aesthetic reasons, is you can add a decorative moss on the top. And so this is an opportunity to add a little punch of color or a different texture or whatnot. So there's a lot of different moss options. I'm gonna use this matte moss. I really like it. And so I'm just gonna go around the plant and kind of tuck it in with that. One thing I wanted to mention really quickly about repotting is that you don't want to repot the orchid while it's blooming. So you want to wait till after it's done blooming to repot it. All right, just to recap, orchids like bright light, they like humidity. When you fertilize, choose an orchid fertilizer. When you go to repot, pay attention to what it's planted in prior to, and then mimic that when you go to replant it. Come on down to Sloat Garden Center. We have plenty of orchids for you to choose from, and we'll help you grow the plants you love.